Welcome to the Essentia Health podcast series. I'm your host, Yeji Lee. In this series, we bring you helpful information to support your well-being and to overcome the many challenges that life can bring. Our aim is to bring you information or actions to support your well-being that can be accessible to everybody. Our topic today is on self-care. With the many everyday stressors that we all face, made more complex for working parents, we want to talk about how to be more conscious about your well-being and mental health, and also to share some tips on how to implement sustainable self-care practices in your everyday life. Our guest today is Norman Weiniger, Vice President of Clinical Services here at Essentia Health and licensed mental health practitioner with many years of experience working in the mental health field.
Thank you, Yeji, and I'm pleased that we could spend some time today talking about the important topic of self-care.
Thanks, Norman. I want to ask specifically for working adults, what does self-care really mean, and what can that look like in our daily lives?
Sure. Simply put, to me, self-care means taking ownership of the task of how we take care of ourselves. Self-care is really the practice of taking intentional actions to preserve or improve our overall well-being, be that our physical self, mentally, emotionally, sometimes spiritually. And I think the key word in all of that is intentional, and the intentionality of these kinds of tasks that we do. It's also about recognizing our needs. So it involves some self-awareness, and it involves responding to those needs in healthy and sustainable ways. So for working adults, it's about deliberately taking those actions, I think, to protect their well-being, especially in the face of everyday job stress, and then balancing that with the responsibilities and the demands of our everyday life that are in addition to our work responsibilities. I think it's important, Yeji, to say that contrary to some thoughts or some things that we read, self-care is not a selfish act or an act of self-indulgence, in my opinion. Instead, it's a healthy action because it involves us in making active choices to regularly check in with and be aware of our needs, and then to respond to them as needed and in an appropriate manner. So overall, I think it's a healthy process, and one that's very important to the larger task of taking responsibility for our well-being.
Yeah, I think you're really spot on with the fact that, self-care is definitely not a selfish act or an act of indulgence, and that it should really be embedded into or as a part of our daily lives. So another question I have is, why do you think self-care matters, or why is it important for working adults?
Yes, and as we're saying, I think it's really a foundational element that we have to be aware of and be conscious of, uh, because it is so foundational for our overall health, our overall productivity, our overall ability to regulate our emotions in the face of constant stresses and demands. I think that's especially true when um, we start to feel, that we're overwhelmed with stress. that things are getting to be too much. That's sometimes when we're least attentive to our bodies and minds' needs, and that can have some bad outcomes. I guess I would mention a few specific reasons that self-care matters. One is that we've alluded to this, how it can prevent burnout in our jobs, for example. It can, secondly, the flip side of that, I think, is it can improve our focus and productivity at work. When we're well rested, physically and mentally, when we're well fed, physically and mentally, then we can think more clearly, make better decisions, and really work more efficiently. So I think that is a big payoff to being more intentional about self-care. Another reason is supporting our mental health. We've alluded to that self-care can help manage anxiety, depression, stress, or avoid those kinds of things in our lives. And so it's important in that way to reduce those kind of risks. Self-care strengthens work-life balance. It boosts our emotional resilience, meaning our ability to bounce back when life sends us some kind of setback, as it almost invariably does. And I think very important, Yeji, self-care can also help us to have healthier relationships. I think that when we're taking care of ourselves, then we're more present and patient with coworkers, with clients, with family, and with our friends. So I think those are several of the reasons that self-care matters for working adults.
And lastly, can you share with us some easy tips or ways that we can implement self-care practices in our lives?
Yes, I think that that's an important question, and one where we are often our own worst enemies, because it can feel difficult, hard, impossible to schedule time for self-care when we're juggling so many of the demands of life. And yet we have to be intentional and pick up that challenge and work our way through it. I always find that self-care tips, Yeji, are very personalized, that what works for me, self-care, may not work for you or work for the next person. But I do know the commonality is that they are personal to each individual, and that they are proactive. Back to that keyword of being intentional about these sorts of things. It means being conscious of what is going on within our self, physically and emotionally, and then responding in a way that addresses those needs. I guess a few examples I could think of. Think of first maybe of physical self-care. And we've talked about this before in other podcasts, but maintaining a good, healthy sleep schedule is important and one aspect of self-care. How we eat and what we eat and when we eat, meals is another aspect. Regular exercise, which can be as simple as going on a walk or going to the gym. And simple things also along the line of how do you stay hydrated, and remembering, Yeji, that caffeinated drinks are not water. Thinking of the social aspect, self-care activities can mean cultivating and maintaining relationships with loved ones. In terms of the mental aspect of self-care, it might be practicing mindfulness and meditation. We know that even a few moments of calmness can help us. Mental calmness and avoiding the mental chatter that goes on can be very helpful to support our well-being. A big one in today's age is limiting our screen time and tackling that challenge in a time where we are all exposed to so much information, and it is so convenient, as is entertainment and such. And I think on the mental and emotional side, it also means saying no to requests that can drain you or overwhelm you or further complicate your life. In the workplace, I might add a couple things maybe about what self-care can look like. One that comes to mind is taking breaks, even if they're very small ones, and breaks that are appropriate to your particular setting. That can help avoid burnout. At work, also asking for help when needed in the appropriate ways is another important self-care tip. And I guess the third one I think of is that many people tell me that having some type of ritual, a transition ritual, if you will, between work and personal time is helpful. And that can be something as simple as changing clothes as you transition from one role to another. So I think those are a few things, Yeji. I think this is all information that could be generally helpful. However, the key is for everyone to take ownership of self-care and think about what are the self-care activities that make sense to them and that they can sustain and kind of build into their lifestyle. And by doing so, further their physical and emotional well-being, Edgy.
Thank you, Norman. It's all very great and important information that you shared today. After listening to today's podcast, I hope everybody learned something about self-care, and I hope that everyone listening can find a way or two to implement these simple self-care tactics into their routine to further nurture their well-being. If you want to learn more about self-care, you can visit your EAP website, or you can also give your EAP a call to speak with a counselor about self-care. And with that, we conclude today's podcast. On behalf of everyone here at Essentra Health, thank you for listening.